Right, so we've got this rough starting point for our drums. We'll just loop that round quickly. Helps if the loop is on. And what we'll do now is a bit of group processing, which is where a lot of the kind of sound of our drums comes from, I guess. And obviously in Ableton, this is really easy. Once you've grouped everything, you can chuck whatever plugin you want onto the group there. Yeah. So what we
maybe not any plugin.
Not any plugin there.
Certain plugins.
Yeah. So what we often start with is Slate's Virtual Mix Rack, which is a really powerful plugin, to be honest. You can get it on a subscription basis as well, so it's not too pricey, and it's got a lot of really nice kind of analog emulations, I guess, of classic plugins which give your sound a lot of character. So it's not like necessarily for surgical EQing and things like that, but for adding character and kind of squashing everything together, gluing it together, they're really good. So what we'll start with maybe first is a bit of saturation. So they've got these kind of preamp emulations here, which can give you a bit of saturation style distortion, and we'll just loop this around, just whack it up, and then we'll just dial the mix back a bit. Oh. Just going to adjust this shaker slightly, it's quite loud in the mix, and the two shuffles as well. Maybe not. So that's the initial bit of saturation there, and then what we'll do is drag in this EQ here. I can't find it. This FGA one here, it's got a really nice sound to it, particularly for drums. I tend to do a boost around the low mid, so 0.8 kilohertz or 1.5. And what you can do is just crank up the gain there and have a look what sounds good. So the 1.5 does sound pretty nice, but we'll just maybe a little 4 dB boost there, and then the high end again. That sounds kind of much brighter and more present in the mix, I guess, which just helps things stand out in the mix, and obviously just sound good to the ears as well. And then what we'll do is load in this vintage compressor here, which is a really, again, nice emulation of the
1176.
Yeah, so classic compressor. And what we'll do is just dial off the attack a little bit, bring that release nice and short, and we'll just drive this input. You can already hear the sound ducking a bit there. We'll just dial back the mix a bit, maybe to 41%. And then finally we'll stick this air on just very slightly, just to give that top end quite a nice presence to it, I guess. So that's what a lot of these plugins in here are great for, really. So we use this air one a lot. What else do we use? The Revival.
Yeah, Revival's great. And this is pretty much this chain. And the reason I guess Tom was able to put it out so quickly is because we used this combination quite a lot. Just to give everything a lift. I mean, we'll play it with and without. I mean, yeah, obviously ignoring the gain increase, it's kind of night and day different, really, especially in the high end.
Yeah, so it adds a lot more kind of natural
just
high end presence.
Yeah.
If you were just to boost, like, I don't know, the high end in one of the individual sounds, it could sound a bit unnatural, but as you're bringing all the high end up together, it helps everything glue together, really. When you do this, though, you start to notice elements of the drums kind of sticking out, I guess, in terms of them not sounding quite right. So maybe that kick needs to come up in the mix a little bit, or everything else needs to come down a bit in the mix. Maybe it's got too much decay on it as well. And also the shuffles are sticking out quite a lot. And maybe the snare is lacking a bit of maybe high-end clarity to it, I guess. Bring that body down maybe. In the clap up. boost a bit of the highs and the claps. And maybe this. It sounds okay. We'll work on that as the track progresses, but yeah. As a starting point, that sounds okay. So, obviously we've got our first plugin here, which is Virtual Mix Rack on our group. And what we'll do is gradually introduce other plugins to give character to our sound. And I think it's really important to remember that with your processing of all these kind of sounds, you don't have to use one plugin for everything. Adding different plugins that are good at different things throughout the kind of processing procedure, you do get a lot more character and interest than just using one plugin to achieve, I don't know, your compression or your EQ, whatever. So yeah, just layering those plugins, little differences each time. Yeah, it's a really, really nice thing to do. What we'll use next is FabFilter's Saturn. Again, we tend to do this quite a lot. It's got some really nice tape emulations there.
And it's multi-band as well.
Exactly, yeah. So we'll dial in the clean tape algorithm here. Give it a bit of drive. And what we tend to do is drive it to a point where it sounds like way too distorted, which is obviously there. You can hear the kick really like bottoming out. And then just dial the mix back. Maybe to about there. That sounds okay. Have a look without. So we're not really gaining any gain, for want of a better word, but it's just a slightly more characterful sound we've achieved there, which yeah, sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And then what we tend to do is just dial in a bit more surgical compression with FabFilter Pro C. So already we can see that straight away after putting that plugin on, it's coming in a bit hot. So maybe in Saturn we'll just go in and we'll just turn our output down just a few dB so we have more to play with. If you run hot out of every single plugin, you're just going to end up with distortion and you end up with less control within each plugin. So yeah.
Yes, headroom's the key here.
Yeah, people call it gain staging, whatever. So yeah, we'll just come into Pro C. We've got this preset in Pro C which is called Nice and Thick, which is actually in the snare preset. And if you load that on, it will sound pretty intense, compression wise, straight away. So what we'll just do again is dial this back a little bit. So we've got a bit of gain there, so we'll just take the gain out slightly. That just squeezes things together again a little bit more. Maybe we'll dial a bit more back in. And it's again starting to sound a bit thicker. So that's sounding okay. Maybe next we can add in a bit more distortion. Don't do this too often, but just going to open Rift. Before that, I'm just going to save this project because sometimes Rift makes my Mac crash. So let's just go into, where shall I save it? D&B Academy. Is that in Dropbox?
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely misspelled that. So yeah, we'll drag in Rift. So yeah, we've got Rift there. Just watch out with Rift, it adds 3 dB gain as soon as you load it in. So we'll just dial that back to 0. And we can just do a tiny bit of, yeah, bit of distortion here, really. Just might be a bit slightly too much. Just dial it back in the dry wet. And yeah, just adds that nice bit of grit to the top end. Now the thing that stands out to me now is this kick sounds a bit whack.
Yeah, it's the top layer, I think.
Even just shortening the envelopes made that sound a bit better. Yeah, so maybe the top as well needs a bit of TLC. We'll just give us a bit more gain. That's okay. So the actual top end's quite nice. But yeah, there's a bit of clash going on in this low mid area here.
You shorten it a little bit as well, yeah. I think.
sounding much better. So if we take all that processing off, it sounds quite uninspiring, uninteresting, but just adding all those different plugins in sequentially, you do get a nice, you achieve some nice results there. So yeah, we've got our mix rack, just doing some initial compression and EQ in there, a bit of saturation as well. Got our tape emulation in Saturn. Again, squashing things together a bit more compression, and a bit more distortion there as well. So it just brings everything together.
That riff might just need to be dialed down a little bit, because I think the kick is getting a little bit distorted there. But yeah, I mean,
maybe dial it down here.
Yeah. With all of these plugins, of course, you are introducing like a level of noise, but to be honest, I think for our sound, we quite like that. We don't want things to be ultra clean,
for sure.
Or too clinical. And yeah, I'm kind of trying to avoid using the O word, but yeah, essentially that's what we're going for. But yeah, there's just way more energy in that as well. So like the kind of dry wet, you can hear it with all the plugins on. It's just way more exciting.
Natural, organic.
Yeah.
Is that DWE song? Right. Okay. So yeah, just as a final step with this process in here, having some reverb on Ascend just gives kind of a nice splash to it. And again, in the hybrid reverb in Ableton as well, with some really nice presets you can just drag on. Let's go for Fat Drum Studio. Just make sure everything's on 100% dry wet, and then from your group,
maybe check the EQ as well.
Yeah, good idea.
Okay, so it's already got some low end taken out, but yeah, we'll just take a bit more out. Maybe take the boost off as well.
Yeah, there you go. It's probably all right.
Yeah,
we'll give some of that high end space as well. So we'll dial that in. It just gives a bit of space, and yeah, it does what it says in the tin, really makes it sound.
Yeah, so where reverb sends are useful is with grouping as well, especially for drums, because obviously an actual drummer with a real drum kit plays all of his or her drums in the same room. So essentially what you do by adding a reverb to an entire group is give that drum kit that you've just built a bit of, you basically essentially make it sound like it's all in the same place, so it just makes it sound a bit more cohesive.
Yeah, definitely.
So essentially put it in a room. So yeah, that's the good trick there.
Yeah, cool. So let's have a listen to that now. Yeah, it sounds okay. Maybe it's slightly too much low end rumbling out of there. If you have too much reverb, it obviously makes things kind of washed out. So having a nice, just about tweaking it until you find it's right, really. And as you introduce more layers, you might want to increase that reverb send slightly or duck it off. That kind of changes as the project goes on. So when we start adding bass into this or whatever, obviously we might change those settings. But that sounds pretty good for the moment, I think.
Yeah, the key thing is just to give yourself enough of a vibe to kind of move on to the next thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And like Tom said, we'll undoubtedly come back to the melodic elements we've done so far, the drum elements, and things will get changed.
Yeah, definitely.
Because ideas are meant to develop over time. So
yeah, for sure. So yeah, the only thing that does stand out to me a bit now is the shuffle sounds a bit separate, I guess, from the rest of the elements in there. So perhaps we can mimic some of that shuffle using the snare or the clap, just so it's all kind of on the same groove. So maybe we'll start with, let's take in the clap, and the classic shuffle position is around about here. We'll make sure the groove's on that we've got, and we'll duck the velocity down a bit. And this might sound bad, but let's give it a go. Okay, yeah, so maybe the clap's not the right sound for that shuffle to be in. Let's have a look at the snare. Okay, that sounds better to me.
Yeah, that sounds better. So yeah, again, mimicking something an actual drummer would do with ghost hits.
Yeah, for sure. Let's have a look. Oops. We'll just have the first one in there. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. We'll duplicate that over the rest of the phrase so it kind of stands out a bit more. Where am I? Here. So that sounds pretty good, I think. Obviously, we might add and remove things as we go through this, but as a general starting point, I think I'm pretty happy with that. You?
Yeah, I think it's enough. Like I said, it's enough for us to move on to the next thing. Yeah, which will probably be some synthy stuff.
Yeah, I guess it gets.
Or maybe we can start with the bass line.
Yeah, let's play this in context now to see what we've got, and then we'll move on. Let's have a look. We've obviously got the bit with the octave up here as well.
It's a bit loud, I think, the chords.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
So here's like a good example of where it's hard to add automation to something without something else going on. So like with these drums now, they're feeling a little bit overpowered by the pads. So like potentially we'd try and filter down those pads.
Yep.
Just to allow a bit more space for the drums to breathe.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're maybe possibly too wide as well. Like, there's things we can do basically to kind of rebalance things.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great.